Who are you? Die, Jedi.
Jedi Academy is the 6th game in the Jedi Knight series, coming out in 2003, only a year after the previous game, Jedi Outcast, which doesn't really seem enough time to make a whole game, even if you do have the engine from the previous game. A bit of context for 2003, that is between episodes 2 and 3 in the Star Wars prequels, and the same year as Knights of the Old Republic, both games featuring Jennifer Hale as a voice actress. You play as Jaden, who is the Jedi apprentice in Luke's Jedi Academy. You are training under Jedi Master Kyle Katarn, who was the protagonist of the previous games. At this point he'd gotten quite powerful, so he was relegated to a more support role, save you having to go through the weird malarkey of losing your powers and starting again, as games often do. Does mean, though, I need to explain that this doesn't take place in the dreaded Disney timeline. It has nothing to do with the Jedi Academy Luke sets up in the recent films. It instead takes place in the expanded universe around 10 years after the original trilogy, where Luke sets up his own Jedi Academy. This one's a bit less concerned with the ways of the old Jedi and is much more relaxed. They're still peacekeepers, but they don't have this weird thing of training children anymore. Refreshingly, you get to fully customize Jaden from your gender to species and lightsaber, later in the game allowing you to have dual lightsabers or a lightsaber staff like that man. What the fuck's he called? Like Darth Maul. Often in the Star Wars universe, most roles are human male, though human female seems to be become an option in the later years. The gameplay focuses almost exclusively on lightsaber combat and your supporting Force powers. You can use blasters, and they can be useful at long-range engagements, but they are utterly inaccurate and not particularly fun to use. I have removed the reticle when I play it, and it helps me not be so annoyed that I'm missing as much. The viewpoint can be switched between third and first person. Mostly third person seems to be how the combat works best. You have the ability to do a wall run and jump, use the Force to navigate around the maps, which, as with many things in this game, sounds better than it is. You'll mostly jump off of walls by mistake, and the wall running is whenever the game fancies. But I do remember it being a big selling point when the game was being released. The controls feel a bit floaty compared to modern games. You have a bit more momentum than I'm used to, but due to the way the lightsaber combat works and you swing your lightsaber and what you connect with is what you hit, being able to move around in a slightly floaty way adds almost a grace to the lightsaber combat. You also have access to power attacks and can throw your lightsaber. The lightsabers are a physics object, so they can get knocked out of the way and you will have to try and force pull it back into your hand. It's not just an animation attack. Even with all these tools at your disposal, lightsaber fights can turn into a bit of a chaotic mess as you're desperately trying to get the upper hand over your opponent. Force powers are very useful for this. Things like Force Lightning is very useful against anyone not equipped with a lightsaber able to block it. As for the plot, it's a bit of a mess, really. So the moment you arrive on Yavin, where the Jedi Temple is, you and your fellow apprentice Rosh immediately have to fight some stormtroopers as someone is attempting to steal the dark side energy of the temple before escaping with said dark side energy, which puts into motion the events of the game. You're hunting down Tavion and her staff that can drain the force power from various locations, meaning you get to go from planet to planet trying to stop her, which does give you the excuse to visit some well-known locations. Not too many though. I don't feel the fan service in the game is overly gratuitous. You do see Chewbacca in the first mission, which may be a bit early, but you don't get to see many other named characters or locations really thrown at you. Your fellow apprentice Rosh starts to complain that he's being held back from his true potential about 5 minutes into the game, and the first moment anyone allows him out their sight, he turns to the dark side and joins the bad guys, which was quite obvious, really. In his defense, though, Kyle is utterly unhelpful. As a Jedi Master, his handoff approach is a bit too literal. The first mission he spends in a pub. The second mission he wanders off to, I don't know what he does, but he leaves you to fight the Tusken Raiders on your own. One mission involves him staying on the spaceship whilst you battle your way through a hijacked train, and one mission starts with you deciding not to bother waiting for him any longer. He's not great, if I'm honest.
Where are you, Kyle? Been waiting here forever. Well, I can't wait around. I've got to do something.
Not long after Josh has decided to be a Sith, he decides he doesn't want to be a Sith anymore, sends you and Kyle a message just before the climax of the game. You and Kyle go and find him. Kyle gets lost on the way, presumably, and leaves you to confront Josh on your own, giving you the only moral choice in the game of, do you stab Josh or do you let someone else stab Josh? I personally like to stab Josh because he annoys me. After that, you then go to Korriban for the big finale between the Sith and the Jedi. If you are light side, you will fight on the side of the Jedi. If you're dark side, you will fight everybody. And the climax of the game is either you defeat Tavion and her staff, or you defeat Tavion and her staff and steal it, and then steal a Star Destroyer. And that's the plot, really. I have lost over not very much, actually. It's not a very plotful game. There's not much character development going on. The only person they really focus on the dark side struggle of is Josh, who is pathetic, really. Kyle doesn't do much. There's a bit where C-3PO is the one giving you orders. It devolves that far. But I don't think that's really the selling point of the game. What is the selling point, I think, is the missions. A lot of the missions aren't particularly different from each other. You go to the location, you fight the bad guys, you occasionally push a button, and then exit the map. It's pretty much how it goes. But there are quite a chunk of missions that are weird, to say the least. One of them is essentially entirely on speeder bikes, where you get to fight people on the back of a bike. One of them, you have to locate missing parts of your ship to fix it, so you can get off the desert planet whilst a giant worm attempts to eat you. One of them involves Boba Fett flying around his stupid jetpack whilst you attempt to blow up various somethings. And these missions are weird because they're not all amazing. They're not all good. They're all experimental. They all have this feeling of, isn't this a good idea? We could try this. There's a few of them where there's an unkillable rancor and you've got to try and traverse the map in front of it. And these are interesting ideas. They stand out to me more than the other ones do, even if they aren't necessarily better than those. I mean, my favourite mission involves you just fighting stormtroopers. A lot of this game has that feeling of experimental ideas. Thankfully though, you don't have to do every mission. So if you do particularly dislike the one with Boba Fett, you don't have to do that. In each batch of missions you do before a big story mission, you can always miss one out and do them in any order. And that feels more interesting than the actual plot does. Because unfortunately this stops you being able to really engage with the plot. If you can miss out a mission or do a mission in a different order, that means they have to be self-contained episodes, which definitely doesn't help it the first time round, but I think replaying it makes the game much more interesting. In conclusion, 9 years later, I still love Jedi Academy. It's a flawed gem, it has massive issues. I had to install a texture pack whilst I replayed it because it just doesn't look good anymore. It is interestingly on Nintendo Switch now. But after all this time, nothing else makes me quite feel like a Jedi.